You'll see quarterbacks come in every draft class that didn't get their opportunity until late in their career, and that could be for a variety of different reasons. Or they got an opportunity one place, eventually lost their starting job, and end up transferring and finishing their career out elsewhere as they get ready to position themselves, prepare themselves for the NFL draft, and potentially as an NFL prospect. And I always think it's interesting when you talk about quarterbacks in this light because, do you automatically hold that against them? Like, is that a concern? Do you worry that, hey, they got beat out by somebody else at job A, they had to go somewhere else for job B? And, sometimes maybe that could be a concern. But sometimes it could also be a thing of wasn't the best situation for them, wasn't the best opportunity. I think back, a little over a decade ago, if I remember correctly, like Joe Flacco, wasn't he originally at Pittsburgh? And then, he didn't win the starting job there, so he ended up going to Delaware. And, Joe Flacco, for the cracks we make about being a lead and everything else, he was a starting quarterback in the NFL for a decade. I don't think the Ravens, or even Ravens fans, ever regret that draft selection because you say, yeah, he wasn't a superstar, he's not a Hall of Famer, but he was solid. You had stability at the position for a decade. Sometimes the situation just isn't the right fit. The scheme isn't the right fit. The coach isn't the right fit. Or that other player at that position may be a better fit for what that coach wants or what that team wants. Or it could be any variety of different things. So I'm trying not to hold the fact that Feleipe Franks got beat out by Kyle Trask at Florida and had to go to Arkansas to finish out his career. I'm trying not to hold that against him too much. And I'm trying to look strictly just solely based on the prospect. Because we could sit there and say, well, Kyle Trask isn't a great NFL prospect. And I agree, he's not. He's a day 3 pick for me. But, when you look at the college level, when you look at what they brought to the Florida offense, I think Kyle Trask was better. So that doesn't mean that Franks was automatically shit. It just means that Trask was better for that Florida team and what they wanted to do, so Franks needed to go elsewhere, and he did. And I had a few people ask me on Twitter about this guy and referencing his name, and I believe that to be because they see some type of major upside or major potential in Feleipe Franks. And I must confess, I'm not really aligned with that. I don't really agree. Like, if you're just talking strictly from the eyeball test, yeah, he certainly passes the eyeball test. He's 6'6", 230 plus pounds. Like, in an ideal world, you'd love all of your quarterbacks to be built like Franks is. You've got no questions about the size, etc. Like, he's got that for days. He's also got multiple seasons of starting experience at the SEC level, so that's not exactly joke stuff. So this is a guy that's played, not necessarily in terms of his performance overall at a high level, but at a high level in terms of competition, etc., and high-profile programs. So there's something to be said there. He's got an okay arm. I seem to remember his arm being stronger than what it actually was. And I think sometimes that's the important thing of you shouldn't always look at the result and you shouldn't always go off of initial impressions, maybe caught him in a game here or there. Like, you could think one thing, and then when you go back and watch him, it's a different story. I think he has a slightly above-average arm in terms of arm talent and arm strength. But for a guy of his size, you look at him and you're thinking, hey, maybe he's more the statuesque, immobile pocket passer with a big-time arm. And the reality is he's not. He's slightly above average in terms of his arm strength. And I think that goes for his durability, or not his durability, his mobility and his athleticism as well. You would maybe think that he's not a good athlete at all. He's a good athlete, but don't let people tell you he's a great athlete. You see many other quarterbacks, especially many of those that I'm rating higher in this draft class than Feleipe Franks, are just better natural athletes than him. They have better footwork. They have better lateral agility. They have a better ability to get up to speed. He could move with his feet a little bit, to where if you had to put him in a spot at some point, he developed into a starter. He has enough movement skills to be able to last at the position and provide you just a tad bit of something in the running game to extend plays, to get some cheap first downs. But he's not a guy that I think you should be scheming a ton of read option running plays for him, because he's not that type of quarterback, and nor does that do him the most justice. I thought his accuracy, ball placement, was average to slightly above average. So again, not great. And I think that's the thing that I look at here when I talk about a Feleipe Franks. Like, I was looking for the elite traits, the elite translatable, projectable skills to the next level, and he didn't have any of those. Outside of size. Like size, he looks the part. But after that, like, there is the intangible of, like, you were the starter at Florida and then you weren't. You know, and you went to Arkansas and you didn't exactly light the world on fire, so that should be a little bit of a concern. And you've had an injury here or there. Not too many serious, significant ones, but you know, for a guy that big, you'd want him to not have to miss time due to injury. But the arm talent is just average or slightly above average. And there are several other flaws in his game that are just really concerning to me. I think his mechanics are mediocre, really. Like, I probably have been a little generous in my grading of his mechanics, because I do think they're at least mediocre, if not worse. I don't think he does a good job of engaging his lower body throughout the entire throwing motion. He's got a bit of a lengthy throwing motion. That's just a bad combination, because you're not getting all the velocity and zip on the ball that you can. And you're taking longer to get the ball out, to get the ball to its intended target, which if you had a howitzer, rocket launcher type of arm, you could live with that a little bit. But when you don't, like some of the throws that he made in college, like, he's going to have to be more precise. And he's also a guy, too, you watch him, there's a lot of one-read stuff. And again, this is sometimes a trick with some of these college guys, because you're projecting, you're guessing, because in some cases, you don't see a ton of going through progressions and, you know, working off of the primary read. I understand sometimes that can be slightly overrated depending upon the team, the scheme, the system, etc. But you do want a guy that can move off of his primary target, let's be clear. And he wasn't great there. You want a guy that can process, react to what he sees very quickly. And I thought he was a little step behind in that sense. He also will have some throws that he kind of throws into bad spots, throws that he just shouldn't make. And then, you know, for a guy like him in a pocket presence standpoint, like, he's a bigger guy. Like I said, he's an adequate athlete, but he's not a special athlete or anything. You want him to be a guy that really holds up well in the pocket. You want him to be a guy with that big physical presence. You want him to actually be a big physical presence in the pocket, and I didn't really see him that way. Like, watching him, like, when he's out in open space, he looks 6'6". But when he's in the pocket, he doesn't. And that, to some of you, might make absolutely no sense, and I completely understand that. But there are some guys that you say, okay, they might be 6 foot, but they feel like a monster in the pocket. Where other guys are 6'5", and you say they feel like a dwarf in the pocket. Like, they don't play up to their size, and I don't know that he necessarily does. I think he's a little panicky in terms of when initial pressure gets on him or he can't get off of his primary read. He's quick to run, and again, like, that stuff's going to kill him in the league. You know, as I look at him, like, I think he has just enough arm talent to make all the NFL throws, but there are several different aspects. I look at him like, he has flaws, and they're not small flaws. Like, just what do you really see with him? Like, what is his upside? I don't want to say he's a dime a dozen prospect, like a Jag, just another guy, because I don't think that's quite the case. But in a pretty good draft class in terms of quarterbacks overall, even if you end up not agreeing with where I rate some of these guys, this is still a pretty good quarterback class. I want to be clear. It is. Like, a guy like this is not somebody that I envision shooting up the draft boards. He's more likely to get to the place where he's a 7th-round pick or an undrafted free agent, one of those priority free agent type of guys, as opposed to being a day 2 guy, because I just don't see the traits. Like, what are the things that make him stand out? What are those special traits? He doesn't have them. You know, so I've put a 6th-round grade on him, which I certainly feel is fair. I might even be being a little generous here, because like I said, at least I can say with the arm strength and the accuracy, some of what I saw, like, it's slightly above average, so it's something to work with. But with some other guys, even guys that might be drafted around the same range as him or after him or even as undrafted free agents, like, I see more potential upside there as high-end, maybe quality backups or low-end, you know, bridge starters in the future. Like, to me, this Feleipe Franks feels like a guy that'll get a first contract in the league, and I don't know if he'll stick around or last past that. Like, maybe he will like a Tyler Bray type of person that gets with a really stupid team and they always want to make sure they protect him every week, even though you don't know why, because you feel like there have got to be better options out there. Like, that's what he kind of feels like to me. And this is the type of guy that, honestly, I look at him, I've put a 6th-round grade on him, but even if he was there and I had a pick in like the 7th round and I wanted to get a young quarterback, I'd probably look for somebody else, honestly, because I just don't see the room for upside or growth. I just don't see those projectable traits that indicates to me he has anything that suggests he could be a starting quarterback long-term in the NFL.